Good morning to all. It's a fine morning. I've just been talking to Pat. We're talking about how long should we have these podcasts? Are they podcasts at all, Pat?
Podcast.
Are they not vlogs, as they say?
No, I think blog is a written thing, whereas a podcast is
No,
a
I
visual
said
thing.
vlog with a
That's my
V.
understanding of.
I said V.
No,
Vlog as in
a
Vladimir.
vlog is a visual.
Yeah.
No, I think what we do are podcasts. In fairness,
All right.
but I'm
Okay.
not sure. Like I'm not one of your tech savvy people, so I don't know. But hey, Jude, before we start anything,
Right.
see today, uh, uh, Trump and they all of nearly Europe's heading to Trump today
Yeah. Yeah.
to back up Zelensky. And I
Mm.
wonder, will there be a repeat of the last absolutely diabolical, And by the way, I see Trump. Apparently, even Fox in America said he was, he'd taken for a ride by Putin on what day was it? Friday, Saturday,
Mm.
and so on. And he went on to Truth Social last night. The liberal media, as usual, will give me no credit. And and he's saying America was dead a year ago, and now he's absolutely lashing on the self praise. He said
All
he thought he had a great meeting with Putin and so on. Jesus, dude, I still laugh at all these right wingers that anybody that buys Trump as a great president has got to be off their fucking
Well,
head.
you
It's as
see,
simple as that, and pardon the language.
the way he the way he convinces them is he has these choreographed meeting moments. Remember with Kim Il Sung or whatever it was the last time, the North Korean leader,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
he was in office for the first time. Remember that very long? They both came from opposite sides, and then they met in the middle, and then they walked.
Uh,
Exactly the same thing with
uh,
Putin. So I guess the idea is to impress on people visually, his followers, what a great guy I am, and look at how I'm shaking hands with these guys, and I know how to do a deal. So he really didn't get any deal. Ukraine, it's difficult to know,
no,
Pat. In a way, it's sort of comic because Zelinsky is got an awful hiding the last time we went to the White House, and this time he's going with his mates.
yeah.
It's like a guy who's afraid going into a pub on his own, so he brings his mates along with him. But I don't think, frankly, that'll make really much difference. Their meeting is going to be surely between Zelensky and
I
Trump.
don't know, Jude. The first meeting's between Zelensky and Trump, and then apparently they're having a sort of
Aye,
a sort of an overall meeting.
for a free for
Uh,
all.
but I'm trying to work out the symbolism of Macron and Starmer and the von der Leyen going with Zelensky. I think Europe is sending a message to America and whatever. But Jude,
What is that message, Pat?
hey,
Because I think
just as can
sorry, you finish what you're saying.
go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, no, a funny thing is, I'm starting to sort of wonder, who are the good guys in this, all this, what's actually happening here? Like, I was listening to a wee bit earlier on the Claire Burns show on RT, and Frank Gardner, the BBC's guys on, and there's Scott Lucas was on. Now, Gardner was very downbeat about Ukraine. He says the Russians are, he says, okay, it'll take them years, but he says they're relentlessly winning the war. He says there's not going to be no ceasefire. Uh, Putin is going to hold on to Crimea. He'll also want to hold on to Donbass, that Russian speaking place. But Donbass is also strategically important to the Ukrainians. Under the Ukraine constitution, they're not allowed to cede land. What do you call her? Von der Leyen says there should be no country in the world who should have its borders changed by force. So Putin on Friday definitely took Trump for a ride round and one hands on. No, another thing about it, apparently Trump thinks he's a genius, doesn't read the briefing documents, goes to these big summit and sort of says, "With my genius, I'll know what's happening within 2 minutes after I enter the room."
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Putin's the other way. He reads every document under the sun, gets all the nuances, and then runs rings round Trump. So what do you tell me? What do you make of it all?
Well, it's very hard to know. Clearly, the message that Europe is sending to Trump is that they're going to stand by Zelensky. But then when you stop to think about it, isn't that exactly what Trump wanted anyway? He wanted to
Yeah.
essentially detach the US from all these forever wars and let the EU look after Europe's
Mm.
business, which is Ukraine's in
Mm.
Europe. It may not be in the EU, but so in a way, you could admire Ursula von der Leyen and others by going and backing up Zelensky. In another way, you could see them as actually doing what Trump wants them to do, saying, we'll handle this, we'll look after this guy. You can clear off if you want to, or you can call little meetings where you sort of preside over
Mm.
efforts to have peace, but leave it to us. I think they're maybe playing the game that Trump wants them to
Yeah.
play. Anyway, I'll tell you this too, Pat.
Uh,
I'll
you
tell you
like
the truth.
Ukraine is losing the war slowly.
Aye,
Uh,
that's
Go
right. I
ahead.
think you have to face up to that. Sometimes, sometimes in history, the good guys don't win. You know, stop to think about
Uh,
it. They really don't.
I and you
And
the other thing in the story. Uh, no, but what I'm sort of thinking as you were just chatting there, Europe's putting on a lot of effort into Ukraine this last week, but I can imagine eventually, see how much subvention they're putting in. They're supplying them with weapons, finance, and all. Like a lot of nations are going to say eventually, hey, we can't keep on doing this. There has to be a ceasefire or solution here. Now, the Russians don't want a ceasefire. They want a deal
mm,
and a big deal. But the other, hey, just to change my own mind, apparently things in Russia are not that great. Economic sanctions have hit them. This war is costing them a lot of things. The uh, the Ukrainians have got smart. They're hitting infrastructure within inside Russia, like particularly oil refineries and facilities like that. So, Jude, maybe the Russians, while on the surface seem strong, maybe they've got an invitation or what would you say, an incentive to reach peace as well.
well, certainly, however powerful Russia may be, it's a very diminished force compared to what it was under the USSR. Now they have nuclear weapons, of
Yeah,
course, which is always the nightmare. But it's possible, yeah, it is possible that the Russian people would weary of this and the casualties they're
yeah,
sustaining and the whole notion that they say, maybe let's look another way to make ourselves stronger. Uh, Against that, you have to make the point that yes, they think long term, but like Republicans, they're prepared in for the long haul. And
yeah.
the other thing, I think, a clinching thing would
Mhm.
be everybody in Russia, I think, practically everybody, thinks Putin is a good idea. And the reason they think that, I think,
Uh,
is that he's holding the place together. There's no, competing groups with their machine guns on the street. There's no sense of society
yeah,
falling apart. He has stiffened it up and tightened it up and shot or jailed his opponents. And, for generations, that's how Russia was run. And I think some people have a certain nostalgia for that
mm,
still. And the average young person might have the same view because, it's sort of like USSR light. And Putin seems to, do okay. So
apparently,
on the one hand, they could
uh,
be get sick of it, but on the other hand, I think there's a lot of mileage in Putin's tank still.
yeah,
Here
I
endless the
think what
service.
you said to there. Apparently, in Russia, while it's not a democracy, it's a fake democracy. But
No.
apparently, after several leaders, along comes Putin. And I remember there was an Irish ballet dancer on. She said they loved him. She says this perception in a lot of places that Putin is not popular. She says this rubbish. She says Putin. She says suddenly the trains run on time type thing. People got paid on time. Civil servants. He stood up to the West, etc., etc., etc. And apparently, it's quite a stable society. And if you keep out of politics, it's a very liberal society. You can do what the hell you want, type thing.
Mhm.
I don't know how true all that is. In fact, I've made
Yeah.
doubts about it. But anyway, basically, what she's saying, this perception of Russia has been very heavy-handed. That's all the politics, the economic life, the sexual life, the whatever it is, the literature. Well, you can do whatever the hell you want. Now, maybe that's why uh, Putin has stayed so long or got staying so long. Usually in Russia, the leader's assassinated after a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's you put your finger on. That's the key thing. He is Mr. Stability, and while he actually looks quite mild and almost self-effacing, but he's the guy who's holding the society, I think, together. And it'll take a lot of persuading that he's not the guy to keep there, no matter whether he gets into bother or even involves life. You see, this is why I'd like to know more about Russia at the time, because uh, I have a suspicion that the whole thing's more complicated than we tend to think. Like on the face of it, you have a country,
Absolutely,
Ukraine,
Jude.
which is invaded by a
Yeah,
superior neighbor, and by force, and is saying
yeah,
we're going to take control of you.
yeah.
That's on the face of it. But then there's always all sorts of other things you're not as aware of, such as why would it be so important that that
Mm.
why would the Putin attach such importance that he'd give away lives of Russian soldiers, that he'd create an international
Yeah.
crisis in order to overtake
And
Ukraine?
the other thing,
Oh,
Jude, there's all sorts of narratives coming out now about that Donbass region,
yeah.
about the fact that this is Russian speaking. They want to be Russian, and in fact, I think wasn't there some talk that the speaking of Russian was banned in that area.
Mm.
Jude, isn't that shades of speaking Irish? If you were caught
Oh,
speaking
yeah,
Irish
yeah, yeah, yeah.
years ago, in this, and there's shades of that.
Uh,
So
well, I gather
it's
also
more
there's parts of
complex than I think.
I'm going to say there's also
But
in Ukraine. I think there's a considerable number of people in eastern Ukraine who speak Russian as their first language. I know again
yeah,
that's that can be
yeah.
deceptive.
Yeah, but it's not as simple as some as black
Uh,
and white as some Western pundits would have you believe. That
uh,
the
uh,
Russian bad guy,
uh,
West good guy. There's more to it
yeah,
than that. That's you're 100% right.
maybe more than that. Okay, let's leave bloody
Anyway,
Putin, leave bloody
change the
Trump too.
subject. Hey, you sent me this thing. Yeah, you sent me this thing about Emma Raducanu,
Ah,
which I
yes.
thought was brilliant. Changing the subject totally. The girl who got, I think it was in Cincinnati last Friday or Saturday, she got really uptight with a baby crying during
Okay.
her
All
tennis
right,
match.
Pat,
And
can I interrupt you for a second? Pat, hold on one
go
second
ahead.
just before we do this.
Yes.
Why do you think the British public love Emma Raducanu, the tennis player?
Didn't she won the American Open or some bloody thing? She was
Yes,
a
that's
winner.
part of it.
Uh,
I think here I'll probably get flack for this, but who cares? I think it's because she's really nice looking. She's young and pretty, as well as being
well,
pretty proficient. So I think
yeah,
it's
yeah. Well,
daft that
that
we
always
pretend
helps.
we don't care what they look like. She really cuts a figure on the court.
Absolutely. There's that, of course. But hey, after a laugh, she sort of looked at the what do you call it, umpire and says, "Are you going to get that chow?" But you know, no way I find it interesting. We were in a restaurant years ago, and I mean years ago. I think it was a Sunday afternoon, and somebody had brought along about a baby about a year, maybe a year and a half, and the baby cried the whole way. And there was a woman next to the next table. She says, "I've spent looking forward to this, what do you call it, all week." She's, basically, I've saved up my money to come out here. And now, by the way, it was a sort of posh restaurant, and I don't even know why we were there. And the woman was really uptight about it. You know, the old one that said you should never take your child to a snooker match or the opera or a tennis match. There's, but then a lot of people see on social media, Shan, like, how dare Emma Raducanu, get so upset about a child crying? No, she's so weak that she can't get on with a tennis game,
What
So,
do you
what's your
think?
view?
What do you think?
Personally, I don't think you should take a child to a tennis match or
I
a snooker
couldn't
match or to
agree.
a
You're
restaurant.
dead right. What the hell are they bringing children to tennis games for? I mean, if it's that kind of child that, is still at the crying stage, how much will it enjoy being at a tennis game? I think, the way they have started now at the end of cup finals or when they've won the league in Premier League in England, the way footballers are coming with their babies and our child in their arms after full
Uh,
time. I think that's sort of trophy children.
yeah,
Here's my trophy. Look at this. Because the kid will, no way will the kid remember that. And if they do, it'll be in the most blurred
not
fashion
at all, no.
possible. I just think they want to say, look at me, I'm a great footballer. And not only that, but I'm a great family man. Um, I all my sympathies with Ed.
Yeah,
Also, of course, as somebody pointed out, if it was a billiard game, there's no way that you could have a baby
yeah.
in there. And if a snooker player was trying to play a shot and somebody was going, ah, that'd just be unthinkable. And the same with golf and other things. But somehow with tennis, that there should, the very idea that there
But
should
no,
be
no, no,
something.
Jude. Like I understand some people have to take children, but I
They
remember
do
that
what?
day that
They
I'm
don't
referring
have
to.
to take their children. They can pay somebody to keep them
No,
at
but
home for a couple of hours.
uh, would you shut up? I'm gonna let me finish that point. But I remember the parent looking as their little Jimmy brilliant, and there he was. Hey, when he wasn't crying, he was running around the room and everybody and getting in the way of waiters. And like the parents seemed to have had no control over him. He was about 18 months,
Hmm,
and so on. And he was a lovely looking child, and
hmm.
I do love children and all the rest. But there are some things I thought to myself, no, Mrs. You're the fact that you're letting ruining everybody else's afternoon out, and they're paying considerable amount of money. And I could see the waiter, particularly when he was carrying out soup, didn't appreciate a child running around the restaurant. So, when you sent me that one, I thought, hey, that's a sort of, you're on a hiding to nothing when you say, hey, children shouldn't be running around, it's things like this, because everybody says, look at them, old fashioned reactionaries. But it is true, isn't it?
Well, he is, yeah, but the position of children has changed dramatically from the point when we were children. When we were children, the axiom was,
Absolutely.
can be seen but not heard. That was a good child, kept your trap shut.
Yeah,
The idea of a child interrupting an adult conversation would be unthinkable, or just
yeah,
intruding on the set. I find, certainly with younger children, that all conversation has to focus on them. So, say you have the parents, you have the child, and then you have visitors, whether they're aunts or uncles or next door neighbors or whatever.
yeah.
All of the attention has to go to the child and talk about the child and say to the child, do you like that? And,
Mm,
in the old days, like the child, you say, it's a nice looking child. And then you go on with your conversation. Not now, not now. I
mm.
think to an unhealthy extent, really. I think youngsters should be, it's good for them to be involved in some way with whatever's going on. But I think honestly, I think it's bad for them to be the center of attention and asking them, would they like to do this? Would they like to do that? What do you think?
Absolutely. Judy, I love the description about the old English one. A man is showing his child at birth, and then the next time he sees him, he's in uniform and he's going off to fight in the war. That was brilliant. Yeah. In other words, it's having children, but not having them. No, Jude, I agree totally. I have seen it this last while. Where children are indulged. Like like you. I grew up. My father, if I had to come out with some comments to adults, the way I've heard kids coming out and company now, I would have been got a, and I'm deadly serious. I would have got a clip around the ear there and then and told get out of the room and don't ever make a comment. But now, as you're rightly saying, I see kids who are actually quite rude being indulged,
Uh-huh.
you know, and sort of
Eh,
allowed to get away with things, and the parents
Yeah.
sort of going, "Look at isn't he awful?" And I'd like, I'm not. We've become very Americanized. I
That's right.
remember my dad saying, about spoiled American. I'll give you an example. The American kid came to our house about 40, 50 years ago. I was, and make it 60 years ago. And he went down to the local shop and he came back up and he had bought a big bag of sweets and he didn't share a single one of them, not one. And we were all the same age. And my dad said that is a seriously spoiled and badly reared child. He says he's just going to be the same as an adult. And by the way, he did. He turned out to be a bollocks, of the highest order. But anyway,
Well, you see, I agree
so
with you to a
I
certain
think,
degree, but I compare myself with the way how I was as a father with the way my sons now are fathers to their children. And I have to say they put far more effort into it. You might even say too much effort into it. But they do, and it's right that they should. My mother used to say, funny enough, if you don't talk to them when they're wee, they won't talk to you when you're old. I know that's true. I think the relationship with the
Uh,
father traditionally in the Irish household was a kind of a distant figure. And I have a feeling that I failed that test. I certainly wasn't overindulgent, that's for sure. What about you, Pat? Were you
yeah.
a,
Remember
what
Harry
did
Chapin's famous song? I
I was going to say, would Rosie have
Go ahead.
said to your children, wait till your father comes back?
Funny, we had a conversation with my youngest, Paddy, a couple of months ago or a couple of years ago. And he says, Dad, you know someone? He says, Mum, we were misbehaving. He says, she'd say, all right, wait till your father gets home. And he says, Dad, I was more scared of that than Mum. He says, because I didn't want to be seen to be letting you down. So just moral. But do you remember that famous Harry Chapin song about a child arrived just the other day, came to the
Oh,
world in the usual
yes.
way? I think it's called
Yeah.
The Cat in the Cradle. And then
Yeah.
it's about the young boy.
Oh,
You
I
said
know it.
about you talk to your children. The way the father reared the son, and then the son just grew up exactly. I'd like to speak to you, Dad, but I don't have the time. The child just
Hmm.
grew up exactly like the father. You're dead
Yeah.
right. I suppose what you reap what you sow.
And maybe more of a happy medium. Incidentally, the one word that was dominant in terms of parenting advice when I was young was
Mm.
spoiled. That was the worst thing that could happen to a child was spoiled, not
Yeah,
neglected. You'd say, "Oh God, neglecting a child before worse." No,
yeah,
no, spoiled your children. That's what the Yanks did, and we don't spoil our children. And look at how healthy they are and so on. I think that was a very bad
yeah.
sort of criterion to set that you wouldn't spoil your children. I mean,
Oh,
just
no, Jude, my dad, and I'm referring to my dad a lot here. I remember him saying to me one time when our kids were small, he said, Hey, Paddy, he says, nobody likes a spoiled child. And I've always remembered that. And I said the same to my own kids. See, if you see a child and misbehaving, you're going, Jesus, go and get him out of here or
mm,
her out of here. And
mm.
there's an element of truth in that. But having said that, Jude, you're dead right. It wasn't about neglect. You were the criteria about having a good child was don't spoil him.
It's funny how you change with age. When I was a young man and we had children, very young, like say 2 or 3 or 4, and we'd go to mass with them. This is in Canada now, and our kids were
Mm,
not quiet. Sometimes they would just shout and
mm,
roar and kick up a racket, and I could see people looking at us. And I remember
yeah,
thinking, well, screw you. This is a child. What do you want? I felt totally justified in that they should adjust. Now, when I go to mass or any other public event and kids start screeching, I get quite irritated and say, do they not know better than to take a
yeah,
child to mass or to a public place and
yeah, yeah,
spoil everything
yeah.
for everybody else? So you do, I certainly do
Aye.
swivel a bit whenever with the years and with a different perspective on it. Okay, Pat, we're running out of time. It's 7 minutes and we haven't even got to the Rose of Tralee yet. What about that? What about that? For
Uh,
the next 2 nights, you can revel in the Rose of Tralee. What do you think?
Jude, it gives me the greatest pleasure to say, like the Game of Thrones and whatever other. I've never ever watched it, not
Have you
once,
not?
and I
Have
have
you
no
ever?
intention of watching it this time either.
You see, I have mixed feelings
Never,
on it.
never.
Yeah,
Jesus,
Father
Jude,
Ted,
no, no, no. What I'll tell you, I think one night, it's years back, and I thought it was excruciating. I watched it for about 5 minutes and said, I'm not watching this crap. Somebody coming up in their wee party piece, they're going to play the accordion or do an Irish jig or whatever, or sing. And some of them, hey, Jude, there was one, I think it was that night I was watching it. I think she might have been Canadian or Australian or
yeah.
something, and she was sang an Irish song, Jude. Have you ever heard, like, if it was an animal, you would have shot it to put it out of its misery? It was so bad. It was so, so bad. And I remember
Uh.
thinking, this is supposed to be, pardon the language, their fucking party piece. You know? Anyway, go ahead.
Pat, you're too hard. You're too hard. Right, here's me. What they're doing essentially, it seems to me, is celebrating the diaspora. The fact that Irish people have gone all over the world
Yeah,
and
there's
now
a
we're
bit of
back
that, all right.
to show you with one of our offspring. And I mean, I'd find it hard to quarrel with that. You'd feel a certain sense of,
No,
it's sort of a benevolent empire that these people are coming back. I also
Yeah.
tend to think it's very important to maintain cultural links. It's nice to think that when people go and make their lives somewhere else far away, that they maintain their Irish culture. But, but
Yeah.
up close, and when it's happening, I find it buttock clenchingly embarrassing. I can't imagine. Gay Byrne used to be
Yeah.
the most embarrassing person. My mother used to say, "Look at him when you taking the shoes off that woman. Would he not have a bit of sense at his age?" I just thought,
Yeah.
Kerry, I gather, are going to have the Sam Maguire Cup on display as well at Tralee this time. Now,
Yeah.
there's an awful lot of money involved in this. And I'd say that's one of the reasons it's had a long life. It's a
Oh,
great
big time,
tourist
Jude.
attraction.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
loads of money locally, and it gives two
Yeah.
nights of free TV to RTE and a big audience as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, absolutely. But
having
here's
said
the,
all
Jude, I was
that,
reading that in the Irish Times this morning. But no,
yeah,
but you know what the thing about it was, there's a Canadian woman. Her daughter's Toronto, whatever it is, Rose and
yeah.
whatever, and the daughter has been accepted into the Canadian diplomatic service.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the mother said she is beyond proud that her daughter is in the Rose of Tralee. And you're dead right. There's a thing there. There's an Irish thing. It's the diaspora. And the Irish and Australia and America and Canada, they are so proud that their children are coming back to Ireland to take part on the Rose of Tralee. Dude,
Mhm.
it's, I know, and maybe like to be serious about it, like I'm not watching the program, but maybe there's a soft power and the thing that's inherent and that helps us across the globe, that it builds goodwill for Ireland across. And by the way, I love the song.
Oh, it's a
I
beautiful
heard me
song.
when I was a wee fella. I'm not a big fan, but my dad loved John McCormick, and I remember one when we listening to it on the radio one morning, the Rose of Tralee, the actual song itself. For
Mm.
some reason, I loved the song.
Yeah, oh,
Not my normal
it
type of
is a
music, by the way.
lovely song. I
Yeah,
here's what I
yeah.
suggest, Pat. I suggest they stop doing it as what essentially is a beauty contest. Now they would deny that, of course, but it is. It's a beauty contest with knobs on, uh, if that's the word I want. Uh, and they add on to it
Yeah.
little bits. Well, what are you going to do? What's your party piece? You're going to sing. You're going to dance. You're going to recite some verse. I suggest they just forget about it as being a beauty contest, which is the way it is at present, and just make it a singing and a dancing and a verse reciting or other, find some other format or some other reason for bringing
Aye,
all
but hold
these
on to
people.
they're saying that it's not a beauty contest, that it's
Ah, Alex, why aren't there any
to
men in
do
it
with
then?
personality and not something. Well, no, well, hey, a man could hardly be the fucking Rose of Tralee. Come on,
Why not? Why
it's
not?
uh,
What are you saying?
Jesus.
Are you saying roses of gender? Would you say, well, this is a fine
Yes, of
masculine
course they do.
rosebud?
Well, as far as you know, I'm no botanist, but I presume roses have gender too. But no, but I take it. Apparently, well, okay, beauty probably pays some, but Jude, let's be honest, and I'm not being disrespectful. Some of the Rose Tralee in the past have not exactly been sort of Miss World. No, but obviously they have personality and they have character. I think
A
there's a woman. I
lovely
think she
girl,
was
in the words of Father
she's
Ted.
a lovely girl. She's a lovely girl. But anyway, one of the woman, I think she won it about 25 years ago. I think she's an Australian, and she's over there. And somebody asked her, and she says, "What's the key to winning the Rose Tralee?" And she says, "Authenticity. If you come across as real and so on, So maybe it is, but Jude, not for me. Really, I couldn't sit. I'm watching
Well,
Dahi O'Shea.
yeah.
Sometimes, someone. It's like watching sweat break out in somebody. You're going, oh God, what's he going to say next? Yeah,
That's true. I feel the same, but I still feel
anyway,
there's something in it. And if they only could revamp the thing and stop embarrassing the nation, I thought incidentally, just find to end with this. Do you remember the year that this woman, she was really nice looking and she was very intelligent, clearly, and outgoing and so on. And she walked it like everybody knew she was going to get it and she won it. And then it emerged
yeah,
she was gay. Uh, and the nation
yeah.
gulped, quietly and said, "Mm, well, yeah, it
Uh,
doesn't matter, it doesn't
and
matter."
that's only a couple of years ago.
I know, but I'm certain, any number of people were saying, oh, and to themselves, that is, oh God, what have I made now? Do I keep saying she's lovely? Or has that stopped her being lovely? Oh, maybe, I don't know, So people were sort of rocked back in
But
the
you
chair.
remember a couple of years back there was a big controversy. One of when
Quick
the
now,
Miss
last
World was
minute,
going,
Pat.
where they discovered that the Miss World they discovered she had a child. There was a big
That's,
controversy about that. Got to do she was either Miss World or she wasn't. Whether she had a child
for
was a total irrelevance. You
God.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose it was the miss thing.
Uh,
Got to be pure, got to be a
uh,
virgin. Got to be a virgin. That's what you're assuming they all
uh,
are. Pat, enjoy it. I
yeah,
know
all
you'll
that
be
crap.
watching it despite what you say. I'm going to watch it and we'll both come back and
Okay.
tell each other what we thought of it. Okay?
Aye.
Enjoy your week.
Okay, Jude.
Okay, Pat.